Part of our buyer's inspection would be using the Lotus factory scan tools to do a diagnostic on the car, check for codes, check to see what software is in the engine ECU, see if there's an update available. Lotus has a recall where the VIN number is written into the ECU. From the factory, all the ECUs have just a generic VIN number in the ECU. You can actually swap ECUs from car to car and didn't make any difference. For the new smog program in California, they're going to plug into the car if there's no codes, and if it can read the VIN, it's going to do a smog test without doing the dyno test. So it's an update that's kind of a good one to get. They've got two different versions of diagnostic equipment for the Lotus. The Scan 3 works on the Lotus Elise. It also works on the V8 Esprits. Works up through model year 07. Model year 08, they went to a CAN bus system, and they came out with a new laptop-based software and hardware called the Tech Center. And this works all the way to the current Voras and anything that they're producing. For this car, we're going to use the good old handheld Scan 3. It plugs into the OBD2 port right in front of the shifter, right below the radio. So it plugs in. It's kind of a basic tool. There's not a whole lot of buttons to push. Doesn't give you a lot of information on the screen, but it actually does quite a bit. You can actually program the engine ECU, the VIN numbers, troubleshoots the airbags, the ABS system, so all the different systems in the car it'll do. It'll also do onboard diagnostic OBD2 scanning on other cars. But for the Lotus, pull up, this is an Elise. It's an 04 and newer, which is the Toyota powered. Got to tell it again that it's Toyota 2ZZ. And then we have engine data, ABS, and SRS. So on the engine data, we can check code, or we can tell whether or not the check engine light is on. We can read the codes, whether it's a set code that turns on the light. This one doesn't have anything set. Or even a pending code which hasn't turned on the check engine light yet, but it's kind of detected something isn't quite right. This one also has a clear no code stored. One of the more important things that we use this for, especially 05s, 06s, the early cars, is octane scaling. Right now this car is 0 all the way across on all 4 cylinders. The engine will use the NOx sensor to detect detonation, and it can scale back the timing for one or more of the cylinders depending on whether or not it's picking up any detonation. Sometimes when you put a supercharger on the car and things aren't calibrated quite right with the tune, you might see some scaling, or you don't use the right fuel in the car, you don't have good premium gas, it might scale. The other time we see scaling is if the cam is worn, and because there's kind of a noise generated by the impact, it picks that up as detonation, and you might see scaling. So anytime we have a car that comes in for a buyer's inspection or a check engine light on or just doesn't run right, one of the first things we'll go in and is check is the scaling. The other thing that's we do with the scan tool is look at the do an ECU dump on it. We can look at all the engine related, how it's been operated, whether or not it's been over revved, how much time it spends at idle, at cruise, or wide open throttle. A lot of that data can be viewed by doing an ECU dump. With the Lotuses, one important thing to check is under the valve covers, the intake and exhaust cams, they can have wear issues. It seems to be kind of a bad batch of cams, probably having to do with the metallurgy of the cam and how well the hardened surface was formed on the cam. Some cars last forever. Some can go bad in less than 10,000 miles. So regardless of the miles, when we do a buyer's inspection, we'll pull the cam cover and check the cam. There it is. What you're looking at is the intake cam and the exhaust cam. These lobes, this is the high-speed lobe, this is the low-speed lobe. The high-speed lobe is where the wear. The the exhaust lobes are always normal, so what they look like is what you want to see on the intake lobe. And initially what I see is a nice surface. I can see this one pretty well. I can almost see these two, but they're kind of on an angle. I'm going to use the put it in gear and move it to where the push it in gear, and that'll rotate the engine so I can look at all the lobes. You've got to get them all out so you can see how the lobe is. Okay, I was able to see this one initially. I pushed the car forward and looked at these two, and then I had to push it back, and I can see this one, and they're all looking good. There's no deep scarring or wearing on them, so it's doing good. Here we have a bucket with some of the more recent bad cams that we've replaced. If you look on this lobe here, you can see how deeply it's scored into it. It'll actually even kind of bounce and do a little wear pattern here as well. That's a definitely badly scored cam. This will trigger the knock sensor, set weird codes, go into safe mode as far as running the engine. It won't rev as high. So 1, 2, 3, and all 4. So this one was well trashed. Sometimes, most of the time, it's like 1, 2, or 3. See what this one has. 1, 2, 3, 4. So it can be any combination of lobes. It isn't just one lobe that does it. 1, 2, 3, and 4. So here's a bad rash of all 4 of them. This is what they should look like. Is it's a convex instead of concave. When it wears into it, it allows for more surface area impacting at one time. And if you run it long enough, it'll actually break the lifter kind of in this weak point. It'll break it here and here, and this edge will be gone, or it'll pound this piece where it compacts. It'll actually break this out, and little bits will drop into the engine. So once it's detected, it's probably a good idea to get it replaced as soon as possible, because all the wearing metal and the bits of metal get down into the engine. A couple quick notes about suspension. Base suspension, you've got 3 different suspensions: base suspension, sport, and track pack. Of the 3, I'd say probably the track pack is the best. It gives you some adjustability. The base suspension is probably the most comfortable of the 3, with the track pack a close second. The sport suspension are really stiff shocks and can be pretty jarring over speed bumps and potholes, things like that. Nitrons, Öhlins, a couple other aftermarket shocks are actually a good upgrade. They're nicer for street driving as well as for track use. Most of the suspension wears pretty good. The one thing that we are typically doing before we do the alignment is on the rear suspension, there's an upper control arm, and under braking, this upper control arm is being pushed forward. And the original stock rubber bushings that where it connects to the subframe, the bushing has a plastic sleeve on the outer part, and that sleeve doesn't give enough friction to the arm for the arm to stay in place, and it'll migrate forward and it'll rub up against the subframe, and you'll get road noise, squeaks, things like that. This car has already had the bushings replaced to a urethane bushing, and they'll pretty much last a lifetime. The rest of the bushings generally stay in place. The only time that we really rebush the rest of the car with the urethane is for track use, just to stiffen up the suspension a bit. This is an original Bilstein. The base and the sport suspension would be a unit like this. The perches aren't adjustable. There's no adjustment for the dampening. The track pack has an adjustable nut here that the body's threaded, and you can adjust the ride height as well as the corner balance. And then on the bottom there's a knob that you would turn to adjust the dampening. Nitrons and Öhlins are just a nice step up. The best mod that you'll ever do on your car is the nitrons or Öhlins. Stiffer springs, a more compliant shock, the car will definitely handle better. I would do that before power.